The Betrothed and the Stranger. The morning mist hung thick over the moors, draping the rolling hills in a veil of ghostly white. The world beyond Hawthorne Hall was a secret place at dawn, where the heather gleamed with dew and the wind whispered of forgotten things. Lady Eveline Hawthorne drew her shawl tighter as she stood upon the stone terrace, gazing out across her father's vast lands. The air tasted of rain and peat, familiar, comforting, yet heavy, as if it carried omens. "Lady Evelyn," came the soft voice of her maid Clara from behind her. "Your father asked that you prepare for Lord Cedric's arrival this afternoon. He will dine with you tonight." Eveline's fingers tightened around the edge of her shawl. "Of course he will," she murmured, her tone betraying the weight she carried. Lord Cedric Blackwell, her betrothed by arrangement, not affection. Their union had been decided the previous autumn, when her father's debts deepened and the Blackwell fortune promised salvation. A noble match, as society would say. But Eveline, at 21, had learned that noble matches were often loveless ones. "He means well, my lady," Clara offered, trying to soothe her. "Lord Cedric, he's a good man, handsome even." Evelyn smiled faintly. "So is a polished dagger, Clara. But one should always know where its edge lies." By mid-morning, the hall stirred with preparations. Servants hurried through corridors, polishing silver and arranging flowers. The scent of baking bread mingled with the chill of the autumn air that seeped through the tall windows. Eveline's father, Lord Reginald Hawthorne, had insisted everything be perfect. Yet perfection, she thought, was not always peace. She found solace instead in her solitary rides across the estate. Her mare, a white creature named Celine, knew the paths well. Together they cut through the mist, Eveline's hair escaping from its pins as the cold air flushed her cheeks. The moors stretched endlessly, vast, untamed, and silent. Here, away from the gilded walls of her father's home, she could breathe. Or so she thought. For when she reined Selene near the edge of the forest that bordered the estate, she saw something, or someone, half hidden among the bracken. At first, she thought it a fallen stag, but as she dismounted and approached cautiously, the truth struck her heart with a jolt. It was a man. He lay motionless, his clothes torn, his face pale beneath a streak of dried blood. His dark hair was matted, and the insignia upon his cloak, half ripped, bore the faint mark of the crown. "Good heavens!" Eveline whispered, kneeling beside him. His chest rose, shallow and uneven. He was alive. "Sir, can you hear me?" The man stirred faintly, his lips parting to release a groan. His eyes fluttered open, storm-grey, piercing, filled with the dazed confusion of one who had seen both death and mercy. "Water," he rasped. Eveline fumbled for her canteen, her heart hammering. As she lifted his head gently to help him drink, she noticed the calluses on his hands, the faint trace of a soldier's bearing in the way he held tension even in unconsciousness. "Who are you?" she asked softly. "What happened?" He tried to speak, but the effort was too great. His eyelids drooped again. Evelyn glanced toward the manor, then back at the stranger. If she left him, he would surely die. And yet if she brought him back, her father would demand answers. Duty warred with compassion, and compassion won. "Clara!" she called, her voice carrying across the mist. "Clara, bring the carriage at once. There's a man. He's hurt." The stranger was carried into the west wing of Hawthorne Hall, to a room seldom used since her mother's death. Eveline oversaw everything, the washing of his wounds, the changing of his bandages, the care of his fever. Lord Reginald objected at first. "Eveline, this is madness. You cannot bring an unknown man into our home. For all we know, he's a deserter, or worse." "He will die without help," Eveline replied firmly, "and I will not allow that under my roof." Her father sighed, defeated by the steel in her tone, a tone she rarely used but inherited from her late mother. "Very well," he said, "but once he recovers, he leaves." Eveline nodded, though her gaze lingered on the stranger's face. Something in it, not the ruggedness, not the beauty, but the sorrow that lived beneath his lashes, drew her like a current. 3 days passed. The stranger awoke properly on the 4th. Eveline was there, seated beside the hearth, embroidering by lamplight. When his voice broke the silence, low and rough, she startled. "Where am I?" Her needle paused mid-air. "You're safe," she said softly, "at Hawthorne Hall." His eyes, clearer now, though shadowed by pain, flicked to her face. "You found me." "I did," she said simply. "You were near death." He tried to sit, grimacing, but she rose and placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "You mustn't move. The wound on your side hasn't fully closed." His breath hitched, not from pain, but at the unexpected gentleness of her touch. "Who are you?" she asked again. He hesitated, then replied, "Adrian Thorne." The name meant nothing to her, yet it carried the weight of a lie half told. "I was attacked on the road," he continued, choosing his words carefully. "Highwaymen. They took my horse, my things. I barely escaped." Eveline studied him. His accent was refined, his posture disciplined. Not a simple traveller, then. But she sensed no malice. "Then you are fortunate to be alive, Captain Thorne," she said quietly, for she had seen the mark of an officer on the scrap of his coat. He gave a faint smile, the kind that barely touched his lips. "Fortunate indeed, my lady. I owe you my life." That evening, Lord Cedric arrived, the manor once quiet, filled with the sound of boots, laughter, and the clinking of glass. Eveline descended the grand staircase in a gown of ivory lace, her golden hair braided with pearls. Cedric met her at the base, bowing low. His smile was perfect, too perfect. "My dearest Eveline," he said, taking her gloved hand, "you grow lovelier with every passing day. If I must wait another month for our wedding, I shall surely perish from anticipation." "Then let us hope you survive until December," she replied lightly, though her tone lacked warmth. He laughed, unbothered by her coolness, and offered his arm. "Your father tells me you've been playing nurse to some vagabond. Really, my love, your compassion is most admirable, though perhaps better spent on causes less dangerous." Eveline's smile faltered. "He is no vagabond. He was wounded and helpless. What would you have had me do?" "Leave such matters to men," Cedric said with a dismissive wave. "You are too delicate for such grim business." Delicate. The word struck her like a slap. If he only knew how strong she had to be, to smile when her heart rebelled, to play the dutiful daughter and bride, when all she longed for was freedom. Later that night, as music drifted from the drawing-room where her father and Cedric drank brandy, Eveline slipped away. Her feet carried her not to her chambers, but to the west wing. Adrian was awake, staring at the ceiling as the firelight flickered across his face. When she entered, he turned his head slightly. "You should be resting," she said softly. "I could say the same," he murmured. A pause lingered, fragile, electric. "I heard the voices," he added. "Laughter, music, you had guests." "My betrothed," she confessed, almost bitterly. "Lord Cedric Blackwell." Adrian's jaw tightened. "You don't sound fond of him." She looked toward the fire. "Fondness is not a requirement for marriage in my world, only convenience." Silence fell again, filled with the quiet crackle of the flames. At last she met his gaze. "And what of your world, Captain Thorne? What brings a soldier to our lonely moors, half dead and alone?" He hesitated, the truth caught between lips that had sworn oaths. "A mission," he said at last, "one I failed." "Then perhaps fate meant for you to fail," Eveline said softly, "so that you might be found." Her words startled even her. She stood quickly, flustered. "I should let you rest. Good night, Captain." As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Adrian," he said quietly. "Call me Adrian." She turned, her hand upon the doorframe. The faintest smile touched her lips. "Good night, Adrian." Outside, the wind sighed through the trees. Inside, two hearts, bound by chance, divided by fate, began to beat to the same forbidden rhythm. Neither yet knew the storm that awaited them. But on that mist-shrouded night in the Highlands, when a lady destined for another met the stranger who would rewrite her destiny, the first line of their story was written, not in ink, but in the trembling pulse of their hands as they reached for something neither could yet name. Shadows beneath the manor. The autumn sun rose reluctantly the next morning, veiling the highlands in a pale, golden haze. Dew shimmered on the hedgerows, as if the earth itself were holding its breath. Within Hawthorne Hall, the world stirred quietly. The soft clatter of dishes, the muted steps of servants, the scent of freshly baked bread curling through the corridors. Lady Evelyn Hawthorne moved through the manor like a wisp of light, silent yet watchful. The previous night's conversation with the wounded soldier lingered in her thoughts like an echo. Adrian Thorne. Even the name carried a kind of gravity. Strong, elusive, and unsettling. By midday, Adrian had regained enough strength to sit upright in the armchair near his bed. His wound had been deep but clean, and Eveline's care had hastened his recovery. When she entered with a tray of broth and tea, he straightened, his expression softening. "You shouldn't trouble yourself," he said quietly. "Your maid could have managed." "I told Clara to rest," she replied, setting the tray upon the table. "Besides, I find I prefer to see to it myself." Her cheeks coloured faintly as she spoke. Adrian's lips curved in a faint smile. "Then I am doubly indebted to you, my lady. You have given me both my life and your kindness." "Kindness costs nothing," she said, "but gratitude, I find, can weigh heavily." He tilted his head, intrigued. "You speak as though you know that weight well." "I do." Her eyes drifted toward the window, where the moors stretched endlessly. Gratitude, duty, obedience, all the same chains in different shapes. Adrian watched her silently for a long moment. There was something in her tone, a quiet rebellion struggling beneath years of restraint. "You're not as you appear, Lady Evelyn," he said at last. "You speak like someone who wishes to flee, yet stands perfectly still." She looked at him then, truly looked, and for a heartbeat neither of them spoke. It was as though he had peeled away her porcelain composure and glimpsed the restless heart beneath. That afternoon the manor hummed with tension. Lord Cedric, having extended his stay without invitation, roamed the halls like a hawk surveying its territory. His presence unsettled the servants, and Evelyn most of all. He sought her constantly, offering flowers, praise, promises, all gilded words that felt hollow. By the second evening, she could bear no more. She excused herself after supper, claiming a headache, and slipped away to the west wing. There, the world felt quieter. removed from the clamour of expectations. She found Adrian reading by candlelight, his brow furrowed over a tattered volume she had left by his bedside. "Milton?" she asked softly. He looked up. "Paradise Lost. I thought it fitting." "Fitting?" he smiled faintly. "For a man who's fallen from grace." Her heart twisted. "You speak as though you were cast out of heaven itself." "Perhaps I was," he murmured, "in my own way." Eveline took a hesitant step closer. The firelight painted his features in gold and shadow, softening the sharp line of his jaw, glinting in his eyes like trapped storms. "I still don't know what brought you here," she said, "or who you truly are." Adrian closed the book slowly, his fingers lingering on the page. "Do you truly wish to know?" he asked, voice low. "Because if you do, my lady, the knowing might bring you danger." "I am not afraid," she said, though her heart trembled. He regarded her in silence, as though measuring how much truth she could bear. Then, at last, he spoke. "I was a captain in His Majesty's 42nd Regiment, until last month. Until I discovered something I wasn't meant to see. Men in power dealing in shadows, selling information to our enemies, manipulating the war for profit." Her breath caught. "Treason?" He nodded. "I reported it to my superior. 2 days later, I was ambushed on the road, left for dead. Then those who attacked you were sent by the very men I served." The words hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Eveline's hands trembled slightly. "You're saying someone in the government ordered your death?" He nodded once. "And until I can prove it, I'm a fugitive in my own country." For a long while, she said nothing. The crackle of the fire filled the silence. Then, quietly, "You risked your life for honour." "Honour?" He laughed softly, though without mirth. "No, my lady, I risked it for truth. Honour is just the word they use when they wish to silence men like me." Eveline's eyes glistened. "And now?" "Now I hide," he said simply, "and hope that one day I may face those who betrayed me and live long enough to see them fall." Outside, the wind rose, rattling the window panes. A storm gathered in the distance, its grey fingers clawing toward the manor. Eveline moved closer to the fire, her thoughts churning. "You mustn't stay long," she whispered. "If what you say is true, you're in grave danger. So is anyone who shelters you." Adrian's gaze met hers, steady, unreadable. "Then why are you helping me?" Her throat tightened. She wanted to say she didn't know, that it was compassion, pity, a sense of justice. But those words were lies. Instead, she said softly, "Because when I look at you, I see someone who still fights for something. I cannot remember the last time I felt that alive." He exhaled slowly, as though her words had pierced something deep within him. "Then we are both prisoners," he murmured. "You in your gilded cage, and I in the shadows of my own making." The following morning, Lord Reginald summoned Eveline to his study. "Daughter," he said gravely, "I must insist that you end this foolish charity. The man you've taken in, there are rumours about soldiers gone rogue. Even Cedric has warned me that the Crown hunts for deserters." "He is not a deserter," she said firmly. "You cannot know that." "I do know," she said, her voice trembling with conviction. "Father, he's no criminal. He was betrayed, and he's wounded, weak. You would cast him out to die." Lord Reginald rubbed his temples. "You've your mother's stubbornness, Eveline. It will ruin you one day." "Then let it," she whispered. He stared at her, and something in his gaze softened, though his words remained stern. "Very well. He may stay until he recovers, but not a day longer. Do you understand me?" She nodded. Yet deep within, she knew she would disobey if it came to that. As days slipped into weeks, the hall seemed to breathe differently. The storm outside passed, but another took root within, subtle, unspoken. Eveline and Adrian's paths crossed more often. A chance encounter in the garden, a conversation by the fire, a brush of hands as she handed him a cup. Each moment drew them closer, though neither dared speak the truth aloud. One evening, as dusk spilled across the moors in hues of violet and silver, Eveline joined him on the terrace. The wind played with the loose tendrils of her hair. "I'll be leaving soon," Adrian said quietly. "Your father's right. I can't stay here forever." The words struck her like a chill. "And go where? You'll be hunted." "I've friends in Edinburgh. If I reach them, I might yet prove what I know." She turned to him then, her eyes wide with fear and something else, something far deeper. "Adrian, if they find you—" He smiled faintly. "Then I'll die knowing I didn't live in cowardice." The conviction in his voice made her heart ache. "Why must every man I've known speak of duty as though it were love?" she said bitterly. "Because for some of us," he replied, "it's the only love we're allowed." The words hung between them, fragile, aching. He reached for her then, almost without thought, his fingers brushing hers. The contact was slight, but the spark it ignited was unmistakable. "Eveline," he whispered, her name slipping from his lips like a prayer. She closed her eyes, just for a moment, and let herself feel the truth she had long denied. But then footsteps sounded from the corridor. She stepped back instantly, her breath catching. It was Lord Cedric. He appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable, though his eyes, sharp and dark, flickered from her to Adrian and back again. "What an interesting scene," he said smoothly. "I hope I'm not interrupting. A recovery." Eveline's voice steadied despite her racing pulse. "Lord Cedric, Captain Thorne was merely taking some air. The physician said it would aid his healing." "Ah," Cedric said, his tone dripping with false sweetness. "How fortunate he has such devoted care. Truly, my love, your heart is too generous for its own good." His eyes lingered on Adrian, not kindly. "Tell me, Captain," he said, feigning politeness. "From which regiment did you serve? Perhaps I've acquaintances who might vouch for you." Adrian's jaw tightened slightly, but his reply was calm. "The 42nd, my lord, though I fear most of my acquaintances would prefer I remain dead." Cedric chuckled, though his gaze sharpened. "A soldier with enemies? How thrilling!" Eveline's patience frayed. "That's enough, Cedric." "Of course," he said, bowing mockingly. "Forgive my curiosity. After all, your guest seems quite at home here." With that, he left, but the air he left behind felt poisoned. Adrian turned to Evelyn. "He suspects." "I know," she whispered, "and that makes you even less safe." He hesitated, his hand brushing hers again, this time deliberate. "Then I'll go. Tonight, if I must." "No." The word escaped her like a cry. "Not yet, please." Their eyes met, and for the first time neither looked away. What passed between them then was more dangerous than any secret Adrian carried, more powerful than any vow Eveline had ever spoken. It was the beginning of everything, and the end of all they'd ever known. That night, as the manor slept, Eveline stood by her window, watching the clouds drift over the moon. In the silence, she could still feel his touch, faint as breath, warm as flame. Below, in the west wing, Adrian sat awake, staring at the same moon, the same night. And though walls and duty divided them, the same thought burned within both hearts. Some chains are not made of iron, but of promises we were never meant to keep. The Dance of Deception. The days that followed passed in a blur of unease. Hawthorne Hall, once a sanctuary of quiet dignity, now buzzed with restless activity. Servants scurried to and fro, polishing silver, pressing linens, arranging flowers imported from the south. For Lord Reginald had announced a grand affair, a ball to celebrate the approaching union of his daughter, Lady Eveline Hawthorne, to Lord Cedric Blackwell. It was meant to be a spectacle, a display of alliance and prosperity, a symbol of peace after years of quiet financial strain. But for Eveline, it was a gilded sentence. On the morning of the ball, she stood before her mirror as Clara adjusted the pearl combs in her hair. "You'll be the envy of every lady in the county," Clara said softly. Eveline's reflection smiled faintly. "And the property of one man in particular." "My lady," Clara hesitated, "the captain, has he said anything more of his plans?" Eveline's gaze flickered toward the window, where autumn leaves drifted like embers, beyond the glass. "No, he speaks little of himself these days, only of leaving." "Leaving?" Clara whispered. "So soon?" Eveline nodded. "He knows Cedric watches him. He thinks it safer." Her fingers twisted the ribbon of her gown absently, and perhaps he is right. For the longer he stays, the harder it will be to let him go. Clara opened her mouth as if to speak, then thought better of it. The words needed no saying. Everyone who saw them together could sense what brewed beneath their silence. That evening, the hall transformed into a kingdom of light. Crystal chandeliers blazed above the ballroom, scattering 1,000 reflections across the polished marble floor. Gold-edged mirrors lined the walls, doubling the glow. Musicians tuned their instruments, laughter and silk whispered through the air. Eveline descended the grand staircase on her father's arm. Every inch the perfect bride-to-be, poised, radiant, untouchable. Gasps followed her descent. Her gown shimmered like liquid silver. Her hair was a crown of gold. To all who looked, she was the picture of grace. But inside, she felt hollow. Lord Cedric awaited her at the base of the stairs, smiling that same perfect smile. He bowed deeply. "My beloved," he murmured, taking her gloved hand to his lips. "The stars themselves envy your light tonight." "Then they can have it," she said softly. "I have no need of envy." He chuckled, charmed, but unaware of the defiance behind her words. The evening unfurled in splendor. Waltzes, laughter, clinking glasses, a dream for the guests, a nightmare for the woman at its center. Eveline danced as though in a trance, her body moving to the rhythm while her mind drifted elsewhere, to the west wing, where she knew Adrian remained hidden in shadow. But as the orchestra struck up another tune, her heart stuttered, because there he was, standing at the edge of the crowd, dressed in borrowed finery, his dark hair brushed, his posture proud yet cautious. His eyes found hers instantly, cutting through the glittering throng. Eveline's breath caught. He had come. He shouldn't have been there. It was madness, but he was. And suddenly, the ballroom didn't feel quite so suffocating. Lord Cedric noticed her distraction. "You seem far away tonight, my dear," he said, leading her into another waltz. "Shall I assume your heart is already dreaming of our future together?" Her smile was brittle. "Something like that." "Do you know," he continued oblivious, "I have already arranged our London townhouse, and once we are wed, I will have you presented to the Queen herself. You shall be admired by all, a jewel at my side." A jewel at my side. Not a woman, not a soul, a possession. Eveline's gaze flicked past his shoulder, to Adrian. He stood near the colonnade, watching. The faintest ghost of a smile touched his lips, as though he understood every thought that flitted through her mind. The music ended. Cedric led her to the refreshment table, still speaking of titles, estates, and influence. She barely heard him. Her heart pounded with a reckless rhythm. And then, in the lull between dances, Adrian moved. He approached her with careful grace, his every step measured. When he bowed, his voice was calm, though his eyes burned with things unsaid. "My lady, might I have the honor of this dance?" Cedric frowned. "And you are?" "Captain Adrian Thorne," Eveline said quickly, before Cedric could dismiss him. "He is recovering under our care." Cedric's jaw tightened. "Ah, yes, the guest my fiancée has taken such particular interest in." But Eveline didn't waver. "He has asked for a dance, my lord. I see no reason to refuse." There was a heartbeat of silence. Then Cedric inclined his head, forcing a smile. "As you wish, my love. Do try not to tire yourself." Eveline placed her hand in Adrian's, and the touch nearly undid her. The music swelled once more, soft, slow, haunting, and they began to dance. It was not a dance of propriety. It was a conversation of movement, of breath, of eyes. Adrian's hand rested lightly at her waist, his other holding hers in a grip both strong and reverent. "I shouldn't be here," he murmured, his breath brushing her ear. "No," she whispered, "but I'm glad you are." Her gown whispered against his boots as they turned beneath the chandelier's golden glow. Around them, nobles watched, oblivious to the quiet storm between them. "You're playing with fire," he said softly. "If he suspects—" "He already does," she interrupted, "and I no longer care." Their eyes met, and the world fell away. It was no longer a ballroom, no longer duty and deceit. It was two souls meeting in defiance of everything they'd been told to be. When the final note faded, they stood for a moment longer than was proper, longer than they should have, before Eveline gently withdrew her hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "For the dance?" he asked. "For reminding me I'm alive." The rest of the evening unfolded in tension. Cedric's temper simmered beneath a veneer of charm. His gaze followed her wherever she went, every laugh she shared, every glance exchanged. By midnight, the last guests began to depart. The orchestra packed away their instruments, the candles burned low. Eveline lingered in the empty ballroom, her heart still racing. Adrian found her there, standing before the tall windows where the moonlight spilled like silver. "You shouldn't linger," he said quietly. "Your fiancé is in no mood for diplomacy tonight." She turned toward him, her eyes shining with tears she refused to shed. "Do you ever wonder," she said, "what life might be if we were born differently? If the world had no chains, no expectations, no names to cage us?" He stepped closer. "Every day. Then why must we live like prisoners?" She whispered. "Because," he said softly, "freedom always demands a price." Their gazes locked, and for the first time neither resisted. He reached up, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Tell me to leave, Eveline. Tell me to walk away, and I will." She shook her head slowly. "I can't." And then, for a heartbeat that felt eternal, he kissed her. It was not a kiss of innocence. It was the breaking of two worlds colliding, gentle and desperate, forbidden and fated. When they parted, she pressed her forehead to his. "We are playing a dangerous game, Adrian." "Then let us pray," he whispered, "that we win." Unseen by either of them, Lord Cedric stood in the shadows of the doorway. His face was a portrait of stillness, but his eyes burned with fury. He said nothing, not that night. but the smile he wore when he turned away was colder than winter. He would not forget what he had seen. Later, as Eveline lay awake in her chambers, the echoes of the dance replayed in her mind. The warmth of Adrian's hand, the taste of that stolen kiss. It was madness. And yet, for the first time in her life, madness felt like freedom. Far below, in his small room, Adrian sat in darkness, his heart pounding. He knew the danger now, not only from those who hunted him, but from what had just begun between them. He had survived battlefields and betrayal, but this was a war of the heart, and he feared it was one he would not win unscathed. Letters never sent. The days that followed the ball carried an uneasy quiet, like the calm after lightning has struck but before the thunder breaks. Hawthorne Hall, once filled with laughter and the rustle of silk, now felt colder. The servants whispered in corners, their eyes wary. Eveline could sense it. Something had shifted. Lord Cedric had not confronted her about what he had seen that night. He had smiled, laughed, even brought her flowers the next morning, but his politeness was too precise, his charm too polished. It was the calm of a predator, waiting for its prey to move first. Eveline spent most of her time in the West Wing, tending to Adrian, who now moved about with greater strength. The colour had returned to his cheeks, though his eyes were still shadowed by secrets and sleeplessness. On the third morning after the ball, she found him standing by the window, his cloak half-fastened, a satchel at his side. "You're leaving," she said. He turned. "I must. The longer I stay, the more danger I bring to you." She crossed the room before she could stop herself. "You can't just disappear without a word. What will you do? Where will you go?" He looked at her with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "I have a contact, an old comrade in Edinburgh. If I reach him, perhaps I can uncover the truth behind the men who betrayed me." She bit her lip. "And if they find you before then?" He smiled faintly. "Then it will have been worth it, for the days I spent here." Her throat tightened. "Adrian!" He stepped closer, lifting his hand as though to touch her cheek, but stopped just short, his fingers trembling. "Don't make this harder than it already is," he whispered. Eveline's eyes glistened. "It was never easy." He turned toward the door. "When the time is right, you'll know where to find me." But fate, it seemed, had other plans. That very afternoon, while Eveline walked the gardens to steady her thoughts, Clara came running, pale, breathless, frightened. "My lady!" she gasped. There's been a letter delivered, no seal, no name. It was addressed to you, but your father took it first." Eveline's stomach turned cold. "Where is it now?" "In his study. He was reading it when I left. He looked furious." Without another word, Eveline hurried down the corridor. The heavy oak doors to her father's study were slightly ajar. She heard the crinkle of paper, the scrape of boots pacing the floor. She pushed the door open. "Father?" Lord Reginald looked up sharply. His face was flushed, his hand gripping the letter like a weapon. "Where did this come from?" he demanded. "I don't know," she said. "What does it say?" He hesitated, then slammed the paper onto the desk. "See for yourself." Eveline picked it up, her fingers trembling. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant but forceful. "My Lord Hawthorne, you believe your daughter's betrothed, Lord Cedric Blackwell, to be a man of noble blood and honourable intention. You are mistaken. He is a partner in dealings that would shame even the crown. Trade in secrets, in men, in war. His fortune was bought not with inheritance, but with treachery. There are witnesses who can attest to this. There is proof. Protect your daughter before it is too late. A friend." Eveline's vision blurred. This can't be true. Her father's expression hardened. You think me a fool? These are dangerous accusations, Eveline. If anyone discovered I entertained such rumours, it could ruin us. But what if they're true? She pressed. If Cedric's wealth was gained through deceit. Enough! His fist struck the desk. You will not speak of this again. Do you understand? Her heart sank. You'd rather I marry a liar than face the truth? Lord Reginald's voice softened, almost pleading. We are not like them, Eveline. We cannot afford scandal. Cedric's alliance keeps us secure. Whatever this letter means, it cannot undo what has been arranged. Eveline looked down at the letter once more. The handwriting tugged at something in her memory, neat, disciplined, deliberate. Adrian. Her pulse quickened. Could it be his? That night, she went to him. He was in his chamber, packing the last of his things into the satchel. The moment she entered, he froze. You sent it, she said. His shoulders stiffened. Sent what? The letter to my father about Cedric. He turned slowly. How do you know about that? I read it. It bears your hand. Adrian exhaled. Then you know the truth. She stared at him. You had no right. I had every right, he interrupted, his voice low, fierce. You deserve to know who you're about to marry. Her hands trembled. And who are you to decide that for me? The man whose brother Cedric had executed for uncovering his crimes. The words struck her like a blow. Your brother? Adrian nodded, his jaw clenched. He served under me in the regiment, loyal, brave. When he discovered Cedric and his associates were selling military intelligence to foreign agents, he went to expose them. Days later, his body was found near the docks, staged as a robbery. But I knew. Eveline sank into the nearest chair, the world spinning. And you took it upon yourself to find proof. I did, he said bitterly, and for that I was hunted. The same men who murdered my brother now wear medals and titles. Tears stung her eyes. Then Cedric is not just corrupt, Adrian finished. He is dangerous to you, to your father, to anyone who stands in his way. Silence fell, broken only by the wind against the window panes. At last, Eveline whispered, Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I thought I could leave before dragging you into it, he said. But after the ball, I couldn't bear the thought of you walking blindly into his arms. She rose, trembling. You think I can undo this? That my father will believe me over a nobleman with power and influence? Then we'll find proof together. Her eyes widened. Together. Yes, Cedric has enemies, quiet ones. Merchants, officers, men who lost everything in his schemes. I can find them, but I'll need your help. Eveline hesitated, torn between fear and a fierce, newfound resolve. Finally, she nodded. Tell me what to do. Over the next days, they plotted in secret. While her father and Cedric discussed the details of the upcoming wedding, Eveline slipped into her father's study at night, searching letters and ledgers for anything unusual. Adrian, meanwhile, corresponded through coded messages sent by Clara to an ally in Edinburgh, a Colonel Alistair Grant, who had once commanded both him and Cedric. Each letter they composed together was a thread in the web of their rebellion, their ink-stained fingertips brushing in the candlelight, hearts pounding as they shared both words and glances they dared not speak aloud. One evening, as they sat close over the desk, Adrian looked up from the parchment. Do you ever think of what comes after this? He asked quietly. When truth is found, when Cedric is exposed? She met his gaze. If that day comes, I shall think of nothing but peace. And me? He asked, half smiling, half afraid. Her lips parted, But before she could answer, footsteps echoed in the hall. They froze. The door handle turned. In an instant, Adrian snatched the papers from the desk and hid behind the heavy curtains. Eveline composed herself, heart pounding, as Lord Cedric entered. "My dearest," he said smoothly, "I thought I'd find you here. Burning midnight oil again?" She forced a smile. "Only writing a letter to my aunt." He stepped closer, his eyes gleaming in the lamplight. "You've grown secretive of late. I hope your letters don't bear more personal sentiments." Her pulse thudded. "You insult me." "I doubt that's possible," he said softly. "I merely worry that your compassion for stray soldiers has become excessive." Eveline's breath caught. "What are you implying?" "Nothing," Cedric said, his smile razor-thin. "Only that it would grieve me to see your heart misplaced before our wedding day." He turned to leave, then paused, glancing toward the window. "Strange," he said. "I could have sworn I heard movement." Adrian held his breath behind the curtain. Evelyn forced a laugh. "The wind, perhaps. It has been restless tonight." Cedric's gaze lingered a moment longer. Then he inclined his head. "Rest well, my love. You'll need your strength. The day approaches." When he was gone, Eveline waited until his footsteps faded before she rushed to the window. Adrian stepped out, eyes hard. "He knows. I think he only suspects," she whispered. "Suspect is enough to kill." She met his gaze, her voice trembling. "Then we must move quickly." By dawn, Adrian was gone, slipping away before the household woke, leaving behind only a sealed letter on her dressing table. Her hands shook as she opened it. "My dearest Eveline, forgive my leaving without farewell. It is the only way to keep you safe. I go now to gather the proof we need, to expose the man who threatens both your family and my honor. If I do not return, remember this: you have given me reason to live when I had none. Whatever becomes of me, know that my last thought will be of you, Adrian." Tears blurred the words as she clutched the letter to her heart. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, soft and silent, covering the moors like a shroud. And deep within Hawthorne Hall, beneath its silken veneer of civility, two secrets began to unfold. One written in ink, and the other in blood. A storm at Hawthorne Hall. The first storm of winter came without warning. By afternoon, the skies over Hawthorne Valley had turned to steel. Clouds swelled and broke, spilling rain in torrents that lashed against the windows of the grand estate. The wind howled through the chimneys like a beast clawing to get in. Lady Eveline stood by her window, her forehead pressed against the cold glass, watching the trees bend and sway in the gale. Days had passed since Adrian's letter, and still no word. Each morning she awoke, hoping to see a rider appear on the horizon. Each night she lay sleepless, wondering if he was dead, captured, or simply gone. Her heart refused to believe the last. Behind her, Clara entered quietly with a tray of tea. "The storm's worsening, my lady," she said. "Lord Cedric's carriage arrived before it began. He's with your father in the study." Eveline turned sharply. "Cedric's here?" "Yes, miss. He came unannounced. Looked in quite a temper." Eveline's pulse quickened. Something in Clara's tone made her uneasy. "Did he say why?" The maid shook her head. "Only that it was a matter of urgency." Eveline drew a deep breath. Smoothing her dress though her hands trembled. "Tell no one I'm going downstairs," she whispered, and slipped from the room. The house felt different that evening. Darker, more oppressive. Lightning flashed against the tall windows, momentarily illuminating portraits of her ancestors, their painted eyes seeming to follow her as she crept through the hall. From behind the closed study doors came voices, her father's booming baritone and Cedric's lower, sharper tone. She stopped beside the doorway, heart pounding, and listened. "You must be mistaken," her father was saying. "No such man could have entered this house unnoticed." "I assure you, my lord," Cedric replied coldly, "I am not mistaken. My informants saw him near the western grounds only nights ago. The same man who fled London under accusation of treason, a former captain, Adrian Thorne." Eveline's hand flew to her mouth. Her father sounded bewildered. "But what business would a fugitive have here?" "That," Cedric said, "is what I intend to find out. And if Lady Eveline knows anything of his whereabouts, she must tell us, before it's too late." Lord Reginald hesitated. "You think my daughter capable of deceit?" "I think," Cedric replied with a smile she could hear, "that love makes liars of even the most virtuous souls." Eveline's blood ran cold. She backed away from the door, her heart hammering. He knew. He had always known. Hours later, the storm grew wilder. Servants hurried to close the shutters, shouting over the roar of wind. Eveline moved like a ghost through the hallways, her mind a storm of its own. If Cedric had spies watching the estate, Adrian would be in mortal danger should he return tonight. A flash of lightning lit the sky, and through the glare she saw movement beyond the iron gates. A lone rider struggling against the rain, his cloak whipping like a dark wing behind him. Her heart stopped. "Adrian!" Without hesitation she seized her cloak and ran. Rain slashed at her face as she crossed the courtyard, skirts heavy with mud. The wind tore at her hair, but she didn't slow until she reached the gates. "Adrian!" she cried, barely audible over the thunder. The rider turned. Lightning illuminated his face, pale, drenched, but unmistakable. "Eveline!" He dismounted, striding toward her. "You shouldn't be here." "I thought you were lost," she gasped, clutching his arm. "You shouldn't have come. Cedric's here." "I know," he said grimly. "That's why I came back. I have what we need." From beneath his coat, he drew a leather pouch, soaked but sealed tight. Letters, signed confessions, Cedric's dealings with foreign agents. It's all here. Eveline's breath caught. "Then we can expose him." A shout cut through the rain. "Lady Eveline!" She turned. 2 men with lanterns were running from the house, Cedric's guards. Adrian's eyes hardened. "Go," he said. "Get back inside." "I won't leave you." He grasped her hands. "Please, for your sake, for us." Before she could argue, the men were upon them. The lantern light flashed across Adrian's face, and one shouted, "That's him, the traitor!" Adrian pushed Eveline aside just as the guards lunged. The struggle was brief but brutal. A punch, a shout, a crack of metal on bone. Adrian wrenched free, striking one man down before the other fled toward the manor. "Go!" he yelled, seizing Eveline's hand. "They'll bring more!" Together they raced through the rain, across the back fields toward the stables. Thunder roared overhead as they ducked inside, breathless and dripping. Eveline pressed her hand to her chest. "They'll search the grounds. Then I'll have to leave before they surround us," he said. "But first—" He fumbled with the pouch, pulling free a folded document. "This is the key piece. Cedric's signature, approving a shipment of weapons to enemy ports. Give it to your father. It's undeniable." She shook her head violently. "No, I can't let you go alone again." He caught her face between his palms. "If I stay, they'll hang me before dawn. But with this, you can end him, clear my name." Tears mixed with rain as she whispered, "You'll come back for me." His lips curved in a ghost of a smile. if fate allows." Their foreheads met, and for one fleeting heartbeat, the world fell silent and anew. No rain, no thunder, only the warmth of his breath and the taste of hope. Then footsteps sounded outside. Torches flickered through the cracks in the stable door. Adrian pulled away. "Hide! Don't move until they've gone." Before she could speak, he slipped out through the back, vanishing into the storm. Moments later, the doors burst open. Cedric entered with 3 men behind him, his coat glistening with rain. "Search everywhere," he barked. "He's close." Evelyn crouched behind a stack of hay bales, clutching the document against her chest. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain they could hear it. Cedric moved slowly through the shadows, the lantern casting his face in sharp relief. Beautiful, cruel, calculating. "He's here," he murmured, almost to himself. "I can smell the betrayal." The men fanned out, overturning crates and barrels. One drew near Evelyn's hiding place, raising his lantern. "Enough," Cedric said suddenly. "He's gone, for now." The guard turned, confused. "My lord!" Cedric's gaze swept the room, and for an instant, a heartbeat too long, his eyes met Evelyn's hiding place. A flicker of amusement crossed his lips. Then he turned away. "Leave us," he said. When the men were gone, he stepped closer to the haystack. "You can come out now, my darling." Eveline rose slowly, defiant. "You always did enjoy theatrics." He smiled wolfish. "As do you, apparently, sneaking out in storms, whispering to ghosts." She drew herself tall. "You know what he's accused you of." "Oh, I know." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "And you believe him." "I've seen the proof." His smile vanished. "You have what?" She hesitated. Too late. He seized her wrist, twisting it until the paper fell from her grasp. "Ah," he murmured, stooping to pick it up. "So this is what he risked his life for." "Don't!" she gasped, struggling. "Don't destroy it!" But he only laughed. "Destroy it? My dear, I intend to do far worse." He tore the parchment into shreds and let the pieces fall into the mud. Evelyn stared in horror. "You monster!" He caught her chin roughly. "You should be grateful, Evelyn. You would have hung beside him if this reached the wrong hands." She spat the words through clenched teeth. "I would rather hang with him than live beside you." Cedric's hand tightened, then released suddenly. His expression hardened to stone. "So be it. Tomorrow, our engagement ends. But before you imagine yourself free, remember this. One word of your little escapade tonight, and your father's reputation will crumble. I'll see to it personally." He turned on his heel and strode into the storm, his coat snapping behind him. Evelyn fell to her knees, shaking. The torn pieces of the document lay scattered around her, soaked and ruined. Then, from the doorway, a voice. "Not all of it!" She looked up. Adrian stood there, drenched, bleeding from a cut at his temple, holding a second dry document in his hand. Her eyes widened. You made a copy." He managed a faint smile. "Never trust one piece of paper." She rushed to him, throwing her arms around him as thunder boomed overhead. "We have to go," she said. "He'll be back." He nodded. "We'll go north, to Edinburgh. Grant will help us." She looked once toward the house, her home, her prison, then back at the man she loved. "Then take me with you," she said. Outside, the storm raged on, tearing at the world, but in its heart, 2 figures rode into the night, leaving Hawthorne Hall behind like a memory swallowed by the rain. The price of freedom. The road north was a ribbon of mud and mist. For 3 endless days, Eveline and Adrian rode through rain-soaked forests and winding valleys, never daring to rest long in one place. The world had shrunk to the sound of hooves on wet earth, and the hiss of rain against their cloaks. By the fourth night, the storm had passed, but the cold was crueler than ever. They found refuge in a hunter's cabin near the border of Scotland, a lonely place surrounded by pines that whispered like ghosts in the wind. Adrian dismounted stiffly, wincing as he pressed a hand to his side. His wound, reopened during the escape, had begun to bleed again. Evelyn rushed to his side. "You should have told me," she said, helping him inside. "You can barely stand." "I've had worse," he muttered, though his voice was strained. She guided him to the narrow cot by the hearth. "You're not invincible, Adrian Thorne." He smiled weakly. "You give me reason to try." She turned from him to hide her trembling hands, lighting a fire with flint and kindling. "If you die now," she said softly, "after all we've risked—" "I won't," he interrupted, reaching for her hand. "Not while I still have something worth living for." The warmth of his touch burned through her cold skin. For a long moment, neither spoke, the silence between them filled with everything they dared not say aloud. At last, Evelyn whispered, "Tell me it was worth it, leaving everything behind." Adrian's gaze softened. "You were worth everything I lost." The next morning, they resumed their journey. The hills rose higher now, the air sharper. The danger, though unseen, was never far behind. At midday, they stopped at a roadside inn to rest the horses. Eveline slipped into a corner near the fire, while Adrian went to bargain for supplies. For the first time in days, she let herself breathe. A kindly innkeeper's wife brought her tea. "Cold day for travellers," the woman said. "Heading north, are you?" "Yes," Evelyn said, forcing a smile. "To Edinburgh." "Ah, a fine city. You'll like it there, if you can make it past the patrols." Eveline's heart stilled. "Patrols?" "Aye, the Crown's men are searching every road for a pair. A lady and a soldier, riding double through the storm. Word is, the man's a traitor to the Empire." Eveline felt the blood drained from her face. She rose abruptly. "Thank you." She found Adrian saddling the horses in the stable. "They're looking for us," she whispered, "everywhere." He nodded grimly. "I expected as much." "We can't keep running," she said desperately. "You'll die before we reach Edinburgh." He turned toward her, rain dripping from his lashes. "Then tell me what else we can do." Her eyes burned. "We go to my uncle, Lord Somerset. He lives 2 days east of here. He's powerful enough to protect us at least until—" "Until Cedric finds us again," Adrian said bitterly. "No, Evelyn, he's too connected. Your uncle will hand me over before the week's end." "Then what choice do we have?" she cried. "You can't fight the entire crown." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I can fight for you." She looked at him, really looked, and saw the exhaustion etched into his face, the raw devotion in his eyes. Her voice broke. "And I can't lose you." He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear. "You won't." They rode east that night, cloaked by darkness. The moon hung low and pale over the moors, but dawn betrayed them. The first shot rang out as they crossed a narrow bridge over the River Tay. The horses reared. Evelyn screamed as bullets tore through the mist. "Riders!" Adrian shouted. "Hold on!" He spurred the horse forward, the sound of pursuit thundering behind them. Evelyn clung to him, her hair whipping in the wind. A second volley split the air. The horse stumbled. Adrian pulled Evelyn down, shielding her as they tumbled into the river below. The icy water closed over them. Evelyn fought to surface, gasping for air as the current dragged her downstream. Adrian's hand found hers, strong even through the freezing rush. They clawed their way to the bank, drenched and shivering. The riders' shouts faded in the distance, that they had lost them for now. But Adrian was pale, blood blooming through his sleeve. "Adrian!" she cried, pressing her hands to the wound. "You're hit!" He gritted his teeth. "It's nothing, just a graze." But when she tried to pull him up, his legs gave way. He fell to his knees, coughing violently. "Please," she whispered, "don't talk, save your strength." He caught her wrist, his grip faint but urgent. "Listen to me. If they take me, don't try to save me. You must run." "I won't," she said fiercely. "We run together." He tried to smile. "You always were stubborn." By nightfall, they reached an abandoned chapel near the wood's edge. Eveline tended his wound by candlelight, her tears falling silently as she worked. When he finally drifted to sleep, she sat beside him, holding his hand, praying to a god she wasn't sure still listened. Outside, the world was deathly still. Only the sound of rain on the roof, a steady, mournful rhythm. Then came the crunch of boots on gravel. Eveline froze. The door creaked open, and torchlight flooded the chapel. "By order of His Majesty," a voice declared, "you are under arrest." Adrian stirred, groaning. Eveline leapt to her feet, placing herself between him and the soldiers. "No," she cried, "he's done nothing." The captain stepped forward, his eyes cold beneath his helm. "Lady Eveline Hawthorne, by aiding this man, you are complicit in treason." 2 soldiers seized her arms. She struggled, shouting, "You can't take him! He's innocent!" Adrian forced himself upright, swaying. "Let her go," he rasped. The captain sneered. "Your gallantry would be touching, Captain Thorne, if it weren't wasted on a doomed man." He struck Adrian across the jaw. Eveline screamed as he fell. "Stop!" she cried. "I'll go quietly. Just don't hurt him." The captain paused, studying her pale, rain-streaked face. "Then you'll both come. The crown will decide your fate." They were taken to a fortress in the Northern Highlands, an old, cold prison built of stone and silence. Days bled into one another. Eveline was kept in a small, bare chamber, allowed only short walks under watch. She asked for news of Adrian every day, and every day the guards said nothing. Until one morning, a guard she didn't recognize slipped her a folded note during her meal. Her heart raced as she opened it. "Eveline, they will try me at dawn. Do not come. The charge will not stand if you remain silent. Tell your father nothing. Live." Tears welled in her eyes. She pressed the paper to her lips. "No," she whispered, "not without you." That night, as the moon rose over the fortress walls, Eveline made her choice. The courtroom was small and dimly lit, filled with officers and noblemen who whispered behind gloved hands. Cedric sat among them, immaculate, confident, smug. Adrian stood bound before the tribunal, bruised but unbroken. He lifted his head as Eveline entered, shock flashing in his eyes. "Eveline," he began, but she raised her chin. "I have testimony," she said, her voice ringing through the hall. Cedric's expression darkened. "My lady, this is not your place." "It is," she said, eyes burning, "because I was there, because I know the truth." Gasps rippled through the room. She stepped forward, clutching a small leather case to her chest. Inside are the original letters, not copies. Cedric Blackwell's correspondence with foreign agents, signed in his own hand. Colonel Grant smuggled them to me before his capture. Cedric's composure cracked. "Lies! You would betray your own bloodline for a man who seduced you." "I would betray a liar before I'd marry one," she said coldly. The judge took the letters. Silence followed as he read. Long, heavy silence, broken only by the scratch of parchment and the flicker of torches. When at last he looked up, his voice was grave. "Lord Cedric Blackwell, you stand accused of treason against the crown. You will be remanded for questioning under guard." Cedric lunged forward, shouting, "You'll regret this, both of you!" But the soldiers seized him, dragging him from the room. Eveline turned to Adrian, tears streaming freely now. "You fool!" he whispered hoarsely. "You were supposed to live." "I couldn't," she said, smiling through tears. "Not without you." The judge banged his gavel. "Captain Thorne, the charges against you are dropped. You are free." Adrian turned to Evelyn, eyes shining with disbelief. Then he stumbled toward her, gathering her into his arms. She clung to him as if the world itself might end. That night, they stood together beneath the Highland stars, free but changed forever. Adrian looked out toward the dark hills. "They'll still come for us, you know. Cedric's friends, his allies, will never truly be safe." Eveline took his hand. "Then we'll keep running until we find peace, wherever it hides." He smiled faintly. "You'd leave everything behind again?" "For you," she whispered. "I already have." He leaned down, pressing his lips to hers. The kiss was soft, fierce, filled with the taste of rain and freedom. Above them, the wind stirred the heather, a whisper of the life they'd fought for and the price they'd paid. Fire and redemption. The weeks that followed their escape were like living between worlds, one of memory and one of fragile hope. Eveline and Adrian took refuge in a small fishing village near the western coast of Scotland, hidden among cliffs that met the sea with thunderous grace. The locals knew them only as Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, a quiet couple who kept to themselves, tending to nets and trading salted fish for bread and milk. For the first time, peace was something they could touch. Eveline would wake each morning to the sound of waves and gulls, her fingers brushing the cool sheets beside her, where Adrian lay half asleep, his arm draped protectively over her. She'd traced the scar along his ribs, a reminder of all they'd survived, and think perhaps this is enough, perhaps this is forever. But peace, as always, was fragile. One evening, as a crimson dusk bled into the horizon, a messenger arrived on horseback. The man was breathless, his cloak streaked with travel dust. "Captain Thorne!" he called, spotting Adrian near the dock. Adrian's posture stiffened. He took the sealed letter and dismissed the man quickly, but Eveline saw the shift in his expression, that flicker of dread behind his eyes. She waited until they were alone, the tide whispering against the stones. "What is it?" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away. He broke the seal and read the parchment twice before speaking. "It's from Colonel Grant. He escaped custody, but there's more. Cedric, he's not dead." Eveline's breath caught. "What?" "He bribed his guards. He's been sighted in Edinburgh. They say he's gathering men, mercenaries, to reclaim his fortune and settle old scores." Her hand went to her throat. "He's coming for us." Adrian folded the letter, jaw tightening. "He won't find us unprepared." For days, tension shadowed their every step. Adrian trained again, sword and pistol in hand, the soldier's discipline returning as easily as breath. Eveline watched him from the doorway, fear twisting in her chest. She'd thought the worst was behind them, yet fate, it seemed, wasn't finished with its cruelty. One morning, she found him standing on the cliff's edge, staring out to sea. "You can't fight ghosts," she said quietly. He turned. "He's not a ghost, not yet. Adrian." She reached for his hand. "We've both bled enough for this. Let him chase the wind. Let's go farther north. Start again." He smiled faintly. You'd run forever if it meant peace. And you'd stay and die for honor, she replied. Their eyes met, filled with all the love and frustration of two souls bound by fate, but divided by fear. Then, softly, he said, I won't let him hurt you again, whatever it takes. She pressed her forehead to his chest, whispering, Then promise me you'll live. He hesitated and said nothing. It was 2 nights later when the storm came, and with it, fire. The village slept, rain pounding the roofs, when a thunderous crash shook the earth. Eveline woke to the smell of smoke. She leapt from bed, throwing on her cloak. Adrian! She cried. He was already at the window, eyes blazing. Downstairs, now! Outside, chaos reigned. Flames licked the thatched roofs, and shadows moved through the smoke. Armed men shouting orders. One voice cut through them all, unmistakable in its arrogance. Bring me the woman! Kill the rest! Cedric. Eveline's blood turned to ice. Adrian grabbed his pistol. Stay behind me! They burst into the street, smoke choking the air. Villagers scattered in panic. Cedric's men, a dozen at least, were setting homes alight, their torches painting the night in red. Through the inferno, Cedric emerged, cloak billowing, eyes glinting with madness. Well, well, he drawled, the runaway lovers. How poetic, hiding among fishermen while the world forgets your names. Adrian stepped forward, gun raised. It ends tonight, Blackwell. Cedric laughed. Oh, it will, but not the way you think. He motioned, and his men surged forward. Gunfire erupted. Eveline ducked behind a cart as bullets splintered the wood beside her. Adrian fired back, felling 2 men, then swung his blade as another lunged. Steel met steel, sparks flying like shards of lightning. Eveline grabbed a fallen sword, her hands shaking. She wasn't trained, but fear lent her strength. When one of Cedric's men came at her, she thrust forward instinctively, the blade catching him in the side. He fell with a cry. Eveline! Adrian shouted. Go, get to the cliffs! I won't leave you, she screamed back. But Cedric was already closing in. His sword flashed, catching Adrian across the shoulder. Adrian staggered, barely blocking the next strike. You took what was mine, Cedric hissed, driving him backward. You think she loves you? She's a hawthorn. She'll tire of playing peasant soon enough. She chose me, Adrian growled. Then she'll die with you. Their blades locked, muscles straining. Cedric broke free, slashing again, but this time Adrian twisted aside, driving his elbow into Cedric's ribs and kicking the sword from his hand. Cedric stumbled, snarling. You'll regret! A single shot rang out. Eveline stood behind him, the pistol trembling in her grasp. Smoke curled from the barrel. Cedric's eyes went wide. He turned, blood blooming across his chest. You, he whispered, you were meant for me. And then he fell, lifeless, into the mud. The rain came harder, hissing as it quenched the flames. The village smouldered in ruin. Adrian dropped to his knees beside Eveline, taking her shaking hands in his. It's over, he murmured, though his voice trembled. It's finally over. She stared at Cedric's body, the man she had once been promised to, now nothing more than ash and memory. I killed him, she whispered. Adrian brushed the wet hair from her face. He left you no choice. But she could see the guilt in his eyes, too, the sorrow of a man who'd seen too much death to believe in victory. They stayed there until dawn, the fire's glow fading to grey. When the soldiers arrived, loyal to the crown, led by Colonel Grant himself, they found the pair sitting side by side, silent amidst the ruins. Grant dismounted slowly. I heard the rumours, he said, voice low. Blackwell's treason, the bounty, the chase, and now, this. Adrian stood, weary but resolute. It ends here. Let the world believe what it will. I've nothing left to prove." Grant studied him, then nodded. "You've earned your peace, Captain. Go, both of you." Eveline looked up, disbelief softening to gratitude. "You'd let us go?" He smiled faintly. "The world has enough ghosts. I've no wish to make more." That night, beneath a sky washed clean by rain, Adrian and Eveline stood by the sea once more. The water shimmered like liquid silver, the wind gentle and cool. "Where will we go?" she asked quietly. He glanced toward the horizon. "Anywhere the stars will guide us." She smiled through her tears. "Do you think we'll ever stop running?" He pulled her close. "We're not running anymore. We're just moving forward." Eveline rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "Then promise me something." "Anything?" "When the world remembers us, if it ever does, let it remember love, not loss." Adrian kissed her forehead. "It will, because you rewrote my fate, Eveline. Every breath I take is proof." The waves crashed below, steady and eternal, and for the first time they both believed that maybe, just maybe, obey freedom was not the absence of chains, but the courage to walk on, hand in hand, into whatever awaited beyond the dawn. The morning after forever. The dawn came pale and trembling, a quiet light brushing across the charred remains of the village. Smoke still curled from the blackened beams, and the sea whispered below the cliffs, as if mourning those lost to the fire. Eveline stood barefoot among the hume ashes, her cloak wrapped tightly around her. The air was sharp, scented with salt and soot. In the distance, fishermen were rebuilding, carrying what little remained of their homes. Yet, despite the ruin, life persisted, stubborn and beautiful. Adrian approached from behind, his coat torn, his arms still bound from the night's battle. His steps were slow but steady. When he reached her, he didn't speak, he simply slipped his hand into hers. For a moment, they stood in silence, watching the waves. "They'll rebuild," she whispered, "even after everything." "They always do," he said softly. "It's what people are meant to do, survive." She turned to him, her eyes hollow with exhaustion, yet shimmering with something unbroken. "And us?" He met her gaze. "We start again." By midday, the crowned soldiers had withdrawn, taking Cedric's body and the remnants of his men. The official report would read, "Lord Blackwell perished while resisting arrest for treason." There would be no mention of Lady Evelyn Hawthorne or Captain Adrian Thorne. Only silence, the kind that buries scandal and keeps society's conscience clean. Eveline knew what that meant. Her name, once spoken with reverence in London's halls, would fade from conversation. Her inheritance, her place among the Hawthorns, would vanish like smoke in the wind. As she watched the soldiers ride away, she whispered, almost to herself, "My father will never forgive me." Adrian looked at her, his expression gentle but firm. "Then let him keep his forgiveness. You owe him nothing." Her lips trembled. "He's still my father." He nodded, his voice quiet. "And you're still his daughter, whether he admits it or not. But you chose to live your truth. That's something even blood cannot erase." She smiled faintly. "You always know how to make rebellion sound like poetry," he grinned. "That's because with you, it is." They buried the dead at dusk. The villagers gathered by the shore, singing low hymns carried away by the wind. Eveline and Adrian stood apart, holding hands as the sky turned to amber, and then to dusk blue shadow. When the last of the candles was placed upon the tide, Eveline whispered a prayer, not for vengeance, not for redemption, but for peace. "May the sea remember what the world forgets," she said quietly, "and keep it safe. Afterward, They returned to the small cottage that still stood on the hill, half burned, but standing nonetheless. Inside, Adrian lit a single lamp. Its golden glow softened the room, washing away the cold shadows. Eveline leaned against the doorway, watching him. "Do you ever think," she said softly, "that fate might have meant for us to meet this way? That all the pain, the danger, the loss, it was the price of finding something real?" He set the lamp down, turning toward her. "I used to think fate was a cruel thing, but now I think it's just a map, one we can choose to follow, or rewrite." Her throat tightened. "And we rewrote it?" He smiled, stepping closer. "Every word." 3 months later, spring returned to the highlands, painting the moors in green and gold. The sea was calmer now, its temper soothed by gentler winds. Eveline had taken to keeping a journal, a habit she'd once mocked in her finishing school days, but now found comforting. Each page was a letter to the woman she used to be, the dutiful daughter, the perfect bride, the porcelain doll who never dared to speak her own truth. Now, her hands were rough from work, her cheeks freckled by the sun, her laughter louder and freer than it had ever been. Adrian had found work with the local militia, not as a soldier, but as a teacher of sorts. He trained young men to defend themselves, to read maps, to write their names. The villagers had come to respect him, the quiet Englishman with the scarred hands and the calm eyes. They lived modestly, simply, but it was enough. One evening, as twilight deepened, Eveline sat on the small wooden step outside their home, her skirts brushing the grass. Adrian came out behind her, a basket of freshly caught fish in one hand. "Dinner, Mrs. Thorne," he said with mock formality. She laughed. "Still sounds strange, hearing you call me that." He sat beside her, smiling. "You'll get used to it." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I already have." They sat there as the sun melted into the horizon, the light soft and gold upon the sea. For the first time, the silence between them held no fear, only peace. That night, Eveline dreamed of London, of glittering chandeliers, of music and laughter, and cold eyes hidden behind masks. But when she woke, she felt no longing, no ache, only gratitude. The woman she had been was gone, buried with the ashes of her old life. In her place stood someone new, forged by love and loss, tempered by freedom. As she watched Adrian sleeping beside her, his hand resting lightly over hers, she thought, perhaps this was what forever truly looked like. Not a promise of endless days, but a dawn after every storm. 1 year later, the cottage had grown into a home, filled with wildflowers, laughter, and the faint scent of bread baking in the hearth. Eveline stood by the window, the morning light spilling across her hair. She held a letter in her hand, the seal of House Hawthorne broken. It was from her father. "My dearest daughter, though I do not pretend to understand the choices you made, I find myself missing the sound of your voice. Time has a way of softening pride, even mine. If ever you wish to return, my door will remain open. Father." Eveline's eyes blurred with tears. She folded the letter gently, pressing it to her heart. For the first time, she felt no anger, only forgiveness. When Adrian entered, wiping his hands on a rag, he saw the tears and tensed immediately. "What's wrong?" She smiled through them. "Nothing. Everything's right." He looked at her curiously. "A letter?" She nodded. "From my father. He says I can come home." Adrian hesitated. "Do you want to?" She looked around their small, warm home. The shelves he'd built, the garden outside, the sea glittering beyond the cliffs. Then she looked at him. "I already am home. He smiled, that slow, heart-stealing smile that had once undone her life and rebuilt it from the ruins. "Then let's stay." She stepped into his arms, resting her head against his chest. The morning light filled the room, bright, golden, endless. That evening, as the last of the sunlight faded into dusk, Eveline took her journal to the shore. She opened it to the final page and wrote, "Once, I believed my fate was written by others, my family, my name, the man I was meant to marry. But I have learned that love, when true, does not ask permission from the world. It simply is. And though I was meant for another, his touch rewrote my fate, not with words or vows, but with courage, with tenderness, with the kind of love that survives every storm. This is our forever, not in marble halls or noble titles, but here in the morning after everything." She closed the book and watched the sea one last time, its endless horizon mirroring the calm inside her. The wind stirred her hair. Behind her, Adrian called her name, warm, steady, alive. Eveline smiled and turned toward him. The sea rolled on, eternal and forgiving, and together they walked home, hand in hand into the morning after forever.